This is tariffs. And I will preface this in the sense that everything I'm about to say is speculation. The Supreme Court heard the arguments for and against Donald Trump's tariffs that were invoked under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act the other day. We don't know exactly when they will decide, but it's likely it will not be until June of 2026. So we'll be waiting a while. It's really a test. I mean, it's the issue, but it's really a test of separation of powers. The prediction markets are saying there's a 30% chance, just a 30% chance, the Supreme Court will say these tariffs are okay. That means there's 70% chance that they're not. From my own reading and from just the reading of legal scholars that I've checked out, just a handful of them, to me, it seems pretty clear that they're not okay. I mean, these are taxes, and the U.S. Constitution is pretty clear that only Congress has the power to level federal level taxes. The real question is what happens if they are deemed illegal. Now, as a side point, this is commentary here. The logic Trump cited when invoking them was economically flawed. I mean, what he was calling a trade barrier, this is on Liberation Day, he had this chart, was really just mathematically the difference between exports and imports. And by that measure, Simon would have a trade barrier with his supermarket. Elon, you'd have a trade barrier with the last car dealership you bought from. And I would have one with a bunch of 900 numbers. No, I'm kidding. No, nobody under 40, nobody under age 40 gets that joke, I think. Anyway, back to the matter. Supreme Court has a 6-3 conservative majority, and 3 of those conservatives were Trump appointees from his first term. The Senate has passed 3 separate bipartisan resolutions expressing disapproval of this, which doesn't really mean much because in the House, Speaker Mike Johnson won't bring the House to vote on this. But in general, Congress doesn't seem to like the idea of Trump doing this. Here's how I see this, and I'd love your views, guys. The U.S. has collected, as of late October 2025, $224 billion roughly in tariffs, which is roughly $142 billion more than the same period last year. Wall Street is already making bets on what would happen if the tariffs get refunded. U.S. GDP is what? Maybe 20 something, 25 trillion. I forgot. As a number, these aren't that huge. I think the more significant factor is the separation of powers issue. In other words, credibility in the U.S. If the Supreme Court says, yes, these are legit, and I'm speaking as a centrist, I'm speaking apolitically, but that would seem kind of scary in the sense of the president would have almost unchecked power, at least in the eyes of the global economic community. But that's my own bias. That's my own view. So I see it less of an economic issue tied to tariffs specifically and more of a global credibility issue. But you guys may have smarter things to say on that.
Well, think about it this way. It's about division of power. And that is really interesting to me because the thing that's going on right now is you've got President Trump saying that we need to get rid of the filibuster. And the Senate is not particularly keen on that. And the House is not particularly keen on that because you get rid of it. Yeah, you get to pass whatever you want now. And so does the next government and the next government and the next government. And you lose a lot of your power to obstruct the opposition. They don't want to get rid of that. And they're not going to get rid of that. Now, think about this then in terms of these tariffs. Well, the taxing power is in Congress. They're not going to give that up. Now, are they going to let the president do whatever he wants in terms of putting these tariffs on and see how long it works for? Sure. Are they going to give him the power to actually say about what kind of taxes will take place? There's absolutely no way Congress is going to do that because if they did, there'd be no point in having a Congress. That's their central power. That's what they do. They decide on where taxes go and how are taxes raised. And without that, there's really no purpose for Congress. So they're never going to give that power to the president. But that doesn't mean tariffs come off or they come on. Now, they could vote. They could simply say the tariffs such as have been imposed are legal, and that they last for as long as this presidency lasts. They could easily do that, but they're not doing it. Then there's the additional point that there are lots of different other ways that they can impose tariffs. So the way that they've been done so far was the broadest, but there are plenty of other narrower ways to impose tariffs. And that means that the refund, it wouldn't even happen. They would give back some money and then they'd raise it somewhere else. So I don't think this is a market driving event. I think that really this is more politics. It's about power, but not really a factor in how the markets are moving.
My own bet, Owen, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And I brought this graphic up from Bloomberg. They did a great piece on like 5 other ways you could impose tariffs. Now, they are all logistically more difficult, and his hands are more tied than the IEEPA. And that's probably why he chose that one, because it's frankly the easiest. But there are other ways you can do it. I would not be surprised at all to hear the Supreme Court say tariffs are technically, Trump was wrong to impose them under the IEEPA, but he can still maintain them under some other auspices, and we're not going to do any refunds. So, in other words, a slap on the wrist, but still business as usual. And that would probably be a nothing burger to the markets.